So let's talk about Nortent. What a lot of palaver, what a lot of fuss, what a lot of controversy. All sorts going on with this brand. It seems to be the brand of the month, the brand of the last few months. There's been so much publicity, good and bad, I think, misleading, all sorts of different publicity. There's just an absolute hoo-ha going on about this Nortent, particularly the Vern series. And I'm part and parcel of that whole controversy, I guess, because I was given the Vern 1 and also the Vern 2, which I'll show you on screen, to test and just to try. And I have to say I really like them in a lot of ways. But I don't think I was one to say that they would be absolute rivals to Hilleberg. Correct me if I'm wrong. I did say I thought this could be a rival to the Sulo, but it would take some time to test it and find that out. And I think what's happened is it's been one of the most interesting periods on social media and the power of it, and also the downsides of it in terms of how this brand has been affected. There seems to be a lot of cynicism towards it, especially amongst probably the Hilleberg owners, who seem very rattled by the whole Nortent thing coming on stream. And it's not a criticism. Favourite tents of all time are Hillebergs, and I've owned quite a lot of them. And some of them are in my top 10, I think at least 2 if you look on my top 10 video. But oh my god, it's really kicked off. And especially when it came to the wind test, there's been a few high profile videos recently of people testing these Verns to the point of destruction. And it has highlighted an issue which was at the back of my mind from when the tents first arrived. And that is that geometrically, or in terms of design, I think it has a weak point. And I'm going to show you that now, and I'm also going to show you potentially a wee fix. It's not a fix as such, but potentially a hack that might help me and others who use them get around the potential problem with the tent. So this is the Vern 1, and obviously the Vern 2 is quite similar in design, but has 3 hoops going over these sides here, but still has the 2 transverse hoops running all the way from end to end. And I think this really is the crux, and this is where the problem lies in terms of its capability in very high winds. So overall it's a pretty robust tent. 3 poles, 1, 2, 3, 4 crossover points. Compared to the Hilleberg Sulo, which is the industry standard, let's say, it's probably as good as you're going to get in terms of strength for it. The poles in a Sulo climb and arc very steeply. So when the wind hits them, you're hitting against these poles, but a more steep angle. These 2 poles in particular are not particularly bent. They're not under a lot of tension. And so here's the problem: when the wind gets up, they flatten. And there's nothing to stop it. This guy line here, the position is too low. I'll tension that back up and show you again. You probably saw this happen in one of the videos online, and that's exactly the tent pancakes, and then you're starting to bend and put strain on the poles in other places. That's not a huge amount of force, so the stress has been transferred, and why you can get fractures not actually at the stress point, or what would seem like the obvious point. It's still going to flatten in the wind, and that's the crux of it. And I think that's exactly what you're seeing happening in all the videos online. And the design, I think, possibly has to change, or I've got a wee hack which I think might help. So here's a wee experiment for you. I use walking poles anyway. Now I know a lot of you won't, but if you're a walking pole user, I've quite often in a variety of different tents over the years used my walking poles to bolster the strength of a variety of different tents. On this one, I think the crux is that your guy line needs to be at right angles to the joint in order for it to stop collapsing. The guy, as it stands on the other side, is too low. It's just never going to be able to hold this pole up in high winds. So all I've done, as you can see, is I've taken my Lecky pole, turned it handle down, point up, original guy line, just looped round it, and then pegged as normal. But watch what happens. That is a lot of force, and that's not deforming too much at all. And I think that's the crux of it. So if you've got a Vern 1 or a Vern 2 and you use walking poles, or you can use any other old stick, I guess, or a rock or whatever, if you can get something big enough, that I think is what you need to really counteract really high winds. But it doesn't solve the basic design problem, and that is that these poles are just not arced enough. So if Nortent were to watch this, or if anyone else wants to feed it back, my thinking is that the arc has to be a lot steeper, just like the Sulo. And then basically you've then got a far stronger tent. Now you can say the poles on these sides, that arch, this mid arch, is probably much more effective in terms of strength against the wind. But the problem is you've got a big couple of side panels there which will bow in. So that doesn't really solve it by turning it sideways into the wind. Although I think on the Vern too, it probably would, because there's 3 of these poles. And we pitched it last weekend at Loch Lomond into some fairly strong gale force winds, and 2 guy lines on each pole. There's 6 guy lines, 3 poles in total, and the thing hardly budged in the gales. And that was because it was side on. Whereas I think if we'd turned it and we hadn't been using walking poles, we'd have the same problem. And I don't think even moving these guys particularly, we could try moving them, would help. But you could in theory also put a pole under the side guy lines, especially on the Vern 2 if there's 2 of you. You've got 4 poles you could use into the windward side to strengthen the tent. So it's a bit geeky and it is a bit of a hack, but I think it's a way to definitely up the performance on the Vern as it stands now. But it will be interesting to see if they change the design in the future, and I think they might. Nortent might be forced into doing it. So all in all, interesting times. Nortent seems to have really rattled the market and rattled the audience and rattled the wild camper, especially the Hilleberg faithful. I found it highly amusing, to be honest, to watch them all getting rattled about it. And I think it's basically because they felt for the first time a wee bit threatened. And I've got no axe to grind with that. I mean, I love Hillebergs, and I would buy a Namax 2 tomorrow. I used to have a Namax 2 GT. I've had all sorts, Actos, Sulos, you name them, all the various tunnel variations over the years. Some are better than others, but I've really liked them. I do think at a half to 2/3 of the price, this is a great tent as well. But if you're looking at 40 mph plus winds, you're going to have to start using some hacks, and that's the basics, because the geometry is just not quite right. So we'll see what Nortent say about this in future. We'll see if the design evolves. Really love the room. I love the relative strength in it and just the flexibility of venting. But yeah, I mean, they sent me it, but let me just say, when you get to my age, you just become kind of impartial and don't really care. You're not going to pander to the brand. I genuinely don't think I will. I'm also a product designer by trade. That's what I was trained in. So it gives me some knowledge about construction and product itself. And I really do think it's a good product. It's just, it has its limitations. But I continue to watch all the debate that's going on. It'll be interesting to see what Nortent say in the future. Also what the YouTubers say, who maybe bigged it up a little bit too much maybe. And also just users, now they're finding out just its limitations. But put limitations aside, what a great tent, I have to say. Really good for the money. So thank you for watching, and just drop your comments below. Intrigued to see what everyone's saying. There's a very polarised opinion out there, but it's very enjoyable and it's good. We should all be able to express what we think. So thank you for watching, and see you out there in the future. Cheers, bye bye.